When we talk about the reasons our relatives may hate us, one of the most profound insights comes from Carl Jung's idea of the shadow. The shadow, as Jung described it, is that hidden part of ourselves we don't want to face. It is the reservoir of our unacknowledged fears, insecurities, desires, and contradictions. Every single one of us has it. It's not something to be ashamed of, it's part of being human. But the trouble begins when we don't recognize it within ourselves. Because when we can't, or won't, face our own shadow, we almost inevitably project it onto someone else. And very often, that someone else happens to be the people closest to us, our relatives. Think about this for a moment. Families carry history. They carry old wounds, unspoken expectations, unfulfilled dreams, and unresolved conflicts. And you, simply by being yourself, might trigger some of those shadows they've been suppressing for years. You don't even have to do anything intentionally. Sometimes just your presence, your choices, your independence, can bring up the very qualities they are struggling to accept within themselves. Let me give you an example. Imagine a relative who has always been deeply insecure about never pursuing their own ambitions. They chose safety over risk, compromise over courage. Maybe life pushed them into that corner, or maybe they just didn't have the strength to take the leap they once dreamed of. Now, when they see you taking bold steps, studying what you love, pursuing a career they never dared to attempt, or living a life more authentic to who you really are, they don't just see you. They see the ghost of what they never allowed themselves to become. And instead of acknowledging that regret inside them, instead of saying, "Wow, maybe I'm still hurting from the choices I didn't make," it's far easier for them to say, "Look at her. She thinks she's better than us. Who does he think he is?" That is projection at work. It's the same pattern in different disguises. Someone who has always struggled with envy may accuse you of being arrogant, simply because you've achieved something they wish they had. Someone who has never learned how to set boundaries may call you selfish because you've learned to say no. Someone who has spent their whole life hiding parts of themselves may look at your authenticity and feel exposed. The truth is, what they claim to hate in you is usually what they cannot face in themselves. And here's the important part. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But when people are unwilling to do that work, when they're not ready to look inside, they lash out. They attack the mirror, forgetting that what unsettles them is not the reflection, but the image within. Now, I want you to notice how this plays out specifically with relatives, because family brings an added complexity. Relatives don't just see you as an individual, they see you as part of their narrative. They have a version of who you are in their minds, a role you are supposed to play in the family drama. Maybe you're the quiet one, the helpful one, the child who doesn't talk back. And when you step outside of that script, when you start living in ways that break free from the box they placed you in, you stir their shadow. Suddenly, they're confronted with the fact that their version of reality was never the whole truth. That's uncomfortable. It makes them defensive. It's fascinating, isn't it, how often people will say, "You've changed," with a tone that almost sounds like an accusation. As if growth is betrayal. As if becoming more of yourself is somehow a rejection of them. But what's really happening is projection again. What they're feeling is not hatred of your change, it's the sting of recognizing they have not allowed themselves the same freedom. They didn't change. They stayed stuck. And now your growth feels like a threat. Let's go deeper, because I don't want this to sound like a simple, them versus you story. Projection is not just their problem, it's also ours. We do it too. Every single one of us has been guilty of projecting our shadow onto others. Think about the times you've judged someone harshly. Was it really about them? Or was it about the part of yourself you hadn't learned to embrace yet? When we feel annoyed, triggered, or resentful, it often says more about what's inside of us than about the other person. So in families, this becomes a cycle. They project onto you, you project back onto them, and nobody wants to admit it. And in that tug-of-war, what grows is misunderstanding, tension, sometimes even outright hostility. The only way to break the cycle is awareness. When you understand that much of the hatred directed at you is projection, you don't internalize it as deeply. You don't let it define you. Instead, you begin to see it for what it is, their shadow knocking at their door. But here's where the challenge lies. Awareness does not mean you can change them. You can't. You can't make them suddenly face their shadow. You can't drag someone into self-awareness before they're ready. And if you try, it usually backfires. Because the shadow resists the light until the person chooses to look at it themselves. So your work, your responsibility, is to not become their shadow. Don't let their projections turn you into what they accuse you of being. If they call you arrogant, don't shrink into false humility just to soothe them. If they call you selfish, don't betray your own needs just to prove them wrong. If they say you think you're better, don't apologize for trying to live authentically. Because when you do that, you abandon yourself. And the irony is, that only feeds the cycle of projection. They remain in denial, and you remain in chains. The wiser path is to recognize their projection for what it is, and then decide how much space and energy you are willing to give it. Sometimes that means compassion, understanding that their hatred is really pain in disguise. Sometimes it means distance, protecting yourself from the constant weight of their unresolved shadows. And often it means both. When you truly get this, when you understand projection at the level Jung wanted us to understand it, you no longer take every jab, every criticism, every whisper of resentment so personally. Instead, you pause and ask yourself, is this really about me? Or is this their shadow talking? That one question can shift the entire way you experience family conflict. And let me tell you something, when you stop carrying other people's projections as your own burden, you reclaim an enormous amount of freedom. Freedom to live your truth without apology. Freedom to let others wrestle with their own demons instead of making them yours. And freedom to step out of roles you never chose in the first place. So yes, relatives may hate you. They may resent you. They may misunderstand you. But often, it's not you they hate. It's the shadow they've been running from, suddenly made visible in your light. And that is why, if you can remember only one thing from this part of our conversation, let it be this: you are not the problem, you are the mirror. When Carl Jung spoke about individuation, he was describing something far more profound than self-improvement. He was describing the journey of becoming whole. The journey of moving from who the world tells you to be toward who you truly are. It is the process of integrating your conscious choices with your unconscious depths, of embracing the parts of you that you've ignored, silenced, or buried, and allowing them to come together into a unified self. Now here's the truth: individuation is not just about personal freedom. It is not simply about you being able to say, "I like who I am." Individuation has ripple effects. When one person in a family decides to grow, to evolve, to step out of the old script, it changes the entire system. And families, by nature, resist that kind of change. Think about how families operate. They thrive on roles. Someone is the peacemaker. Someone is the rebel. Someone is the quiet one, the golden child, the black sheep. These roles may not be fair, they may not reflect the fullness of who we are, but they provide the family with a sense of balance, even if it's a dysfunctional balance. And when you suddenly step out of that role, when you refuse to play the character they've cast you as, the whole play feels like it's falling apart. That is why relatives may resist your individuation. It is not that they don't want you to be happy. It is that your happiness, your growth, your authenticity, threatens the structure they have grown comfortable with. It's like pulling one brick out of a wall, the entire wall starts to shift. And for people who cling to stability, even if that stability is built on silence, sacrifice, or self-denial, your evolution feels like danger. Let me bring this closer to home. Imagine you grew up in a family where everyone avoided conflict. Problems were swept under the rug. No one ever raised their voice. And suddenly, you, as an adult, begin to value honesty. You start naming the things that no one ever wanted to say out loud. You set boundaries. You tell the truth. What happens? They say you're difficult. They say you're breaking the family apart. But you're not breaking anything, you're simply refusing to live in denial. Your individuation, your wholeness, feels like rebellion to those who still live in fragmentation. Or think of another example. Maybe your family struggled with scarcity. Everyone settled for less, believed they couldn't ask for more, carried the weight of limitation in their bones. And then you come along, daring to believe in abundance. You go after opportunities they never reached for. You create a life they thought wasn't possible for people like us. And suddenly, your success is not just success, it's disruption. It's as if your courage shines a light on all the ways they settled. That kind of light can feel blinding to people who have grown used to the dark. This is what individuation does. It shakes the foundations of collective expectations. It doesn't just free you, it forces others to confront the chains they're still wearing. And let me tell you, many people do not want to confront that. It is safer, easier, more familiar to resent you for changing than to admit they, too, are longing to change. Now, I want to pause here, because I know this can sound heavy. It can sound like the path of individuation is lonely, maybe even painful. And in many ways, it is. Growth always costs something. Choosing yourself often means disappointing others. But what I want you to hear, and what I want you to believe, is that individuation is worth it. Because the cost of betraying yourself is always higher than the cost of disappointing others. See, when you live your life trying to please, trying to fit in, trying to stay within the script your relatives wrote for you, you may keep the peace for a little while, but you lose yourself in the process. You wake up one day realizing you have become a stranger to your own soul. And let me tell you, there is no deeper loneliness than being disconnected from who you truly are. This is why individuation is not optional. It is the work of being alive. To step into your wholeness. To let yourself evolve. To become the person only you can be. And if that journey makes others uncomfortable, if it stirs resistance, that's not a sign you're wrong. That's a sign you're moving in the right direction. But here's the nuance: resisting individuation is not always rooted in malice. Your relatives may resist your growth not because they hate you, but because they fear losing you. Families often equate sameness with closeness. They think, if you're like us, you belong. If you're different, you're abandoning us. They don't yet understand that love is not about sameness. Love is about freedom. And when one person in a family becomes free, it can teach everyone what love really is. So what do you do when your individuation meets resistance? You stay the course. You hold your ground. You remind yourself that your growth is not betrayal, it is alignment. You are not rejecting your family, you are reclaiming yourself. And in reclaiming yourself, you are offering them the chance, whether they take it or not, to do the same. Let me tell you, when I look back at the times I chose individuation, when I chose to stand in my own truth rather than collapse into someone else's expectations, those were the moments that shaped my life. Yes, it cost relationships. Yes, it created friction. But it also gave me integrity, and with integrity comes peace. Peace is not about avoiding conflict. Peace is about living in harmony with your own soul. Now here's where philosophy and psychology meet. Jung believed that individuation is not just personal, it is archetypal. It is the journey every human is called to make. To move from the unconscious to the conscious, from the collective mask to the authentic self. And so when your relatives resist your individuation, they are not just resisting you. They are resisting the universal call to growth. They are resisting life itself. And you cannot let that resistance become your cage. Because if you do, you not only betray yourself, you also rob the world of your uniqueness. The gifts you were meant to give, the impact you were meant to make, the love you were meant to share, all of it gets buried when you stay small just to make others comfortable. So yes, individuation comes with resistance. But it also comes with liberation. And here is the paradox: often, the very relatives who hate your individuation today may one day respect it, even thank you for it. Because by living authentically, you give them permission to imagine a different life for themselves. You show them that another way is possible. You become the living evidence that the script can be rewritten. And that, my friends, is the power of individuation. It's not selfish. It's service. It's not rebellion. It's revolution. Not the kind that tears families apart, but the kind that awakens them to something deeper than roles, deeper than masks, something true. So when your relatives resist you, when they whisper or criticize or pull away, I want you to remember this: their resistance is not a verdict on your life. It is a reflection of their fear. Your job is not to shrink to fit their fear, but to expand into your freedom. Because the world doesn't need another person trapped in a role. The world needs you, whole, alive, and unafraid to be yourself. First, your relatives don't hate you, they hate the mirror you hold up to their unlived life. Second, authenticity is not betrayal, it is the greatest gift you can give to yourself and the world.